The noise you hear in the background is Johnny welding up some of the tube framing for the Flaminia Zagato. So you'll just have to excuse it for now. What I'm doing right now is I'm applying a special primer, especially formulated for things just like this, things that kind of come in contact with high acids, just like a battery or older batteries used to. If you're looking at buying an earlier Alpha like this, I would suggest you pull the battery out if you can, as long as you're not offending somebody, and pull up the rubber mat if it's still there. Because if you look underneath it, if the battery tray is rotted out, there's something you need to think about. If the battery tray is rotted out, the rail, this component right here, probably has rot right under it. Okay, because this is just resistance weld on top of it, and it traps a lot of moisture, and inevitably almost all of these eventually rust out. Okay, but here's the real challenge. The sway bar in front, the sway bar mounts, are directly under this. So if this is rotted out due to battery acid leaking, eating up the paint, then the rail's rotted out. If the rail's rotted out, the mounting system for the sway bar could be compromised. So pull that battery out if you're looking at buying one of these. Pull the tray up and see if you got damage here. If you got damage here, you have to assume the worst, because they all have that challenge at some point in time if they're not maintained. So in this case, we don't have any rust through. We're kind of lucky, and that's pretty rare. So what I am doing is I'm using this special battery tray liner primer. Yeah, it doesn't look that pretty, but what happens is once it dries and we scuff it a little bit, we can shoot the paint that we're going to paint the engine bay right over the top of it, and this will be a sealed up product, and you don't have to worry about battery acid ever eating it up. Now usually where this came from was that earlier cars, the batteries that are in them were maintenance type batteries, which means that they constantly were releasing vapor, battery acid, vapor alkalides into the atmosphere. So they would release into the atmosphere, collect, land on the battery box, and inevitably that alkali would eat the paint, eat through the paint, eat the metal, rust it out, and keep on going. Here's something the rest of the automotive building world will cringe if they know that you know this. It is almost impossible to have a seamless from start to finish on a build. In fact, you probably have more challenges that are unjustifiable as far as building than anything you could possibly imagine when it comes to putting a car together, especially one like this 60 Sprint that is absolutely a disaster from minute one. Most people would have said this is a car that should never ever been restored. Because it was a Veloce, it was easy enough for the owner to justify it in his own mind that it needed to be saved. But these 101 750 cars tend to have some significant issues that are so well hidden, not by anybody's intentions, but by just the build of the car, that sometimes you just have no idea how bad it is until you start cutting metal off and finding there's nothing there holding it together. This is one of them. This is the part of the build where things kind of get a little intense. From an owner's point of view, the car looks very finished and it should be deliverable. From the builder's point of view, it's not. There's a lot of things that we're doing right now in this car that aren't buildable. They're not buildable because of ethics more than anything. Whether it's something my guys didn't do quite well enough, or if it's something that didn't just finish the way it should have. Customers already paid for that service once, so we can't bill them twice for that. Could we hide it? Yeah, theoretically we could, but that's bad business and that's not a very ethical thing to do. This car, you know, we want it to go home. The owner wants it, but there's just little snags that if I let it go today, it's only going to be a problem tomorrow. I'd rather have a customer that's a little annoyed versus a customer that's extremely hot once things have happened. Not everything you ever do is ever going to be perfect. Sometimes the decisions we make as builders is influenced by the customer or the customer's attitude or their philosophy to the build. And this is kind of like one of those situations where you're feeling the pressure of getting it done. You know it needs to go away. You're not billing anything for it right now, so financially from our point of view, it's not a good car to still have. But it's the right thing to do. Standing behind your work is everything in this business. And that's why a lot of restoration businesses kind of go under. They go under because either A, the fit and finish doesn't last, or B, they don't stand behind what they do and their name kind of gets dragged into the dirt. You know, we're no different than anybody else. We certainly have our challenges. We certainly have things that can be a struggle at times, but nobody will ever question our ethics. And that's something I kind of want to make sure that you have a sense about, because if you're having somebody else build your car, or if you're having somebody else just do the body work on it, and I've said this 1,000 times and I'll say it again, dialogue is everything. They should feel free to exchange information with you. You should feel comfortable enough to ask them questions. If daily dialogue is too much of a battle, the relationship is compromised and resolution needs to be had. We're not perfect either. We have plenty of situations where we've had customers, it's just very difficult to communicate with them. And that's sad. But the thing of it is recognize it, correct it if at all possible, and let's make a car happy at the finish line. This is a perfect example. We're gonna make it right, it's gonna be great, and it's gonna be delivered in better than new condition. Those are all things in my mind are above expectation. And that's what we have to do in this business. We have to exceed expectations. Doesn't mean you always gonna do it, but if you keep trying, you can't go wrong. In this case, this car, we had to paint the dash a couple of times. From the factory, there's a lot of lead work that's done on these, so if they're damaged during the assembly process, they tend to have an excessive amount of lead. You don't know the lead's there often until you start removing the paint. In this case, because the car was thoroughly blasted, then we put it in an epoxy. The epoxy is a very flat material, meaning it has no gloss, so it was very difficult to see any defects in it. But the minute you put glossy paint to it, defects stand out. Yeah, we could potentially just kind of ignored it and moved on, and the customer may or may not have ever known. But we knew it was there. That's why we have to correct it. So we resprayed the dash. We did a little bit more work on the thresholds because I felt like they needed more attention. And those are the right things. They cost us money and they're not financially feasible to do, but effectively, this is your business card, and if it isn't right, you know. Okay, so we just got a bunch of stuff back from the chromers for one of the builds. It's a car I just left. It's going over to get a headliner put in it. Something you probably need to consider when you're building your car. Early 105 series cars had a whole lot more chrome and not as much stainless steel. Later series 105 cars had a whole lot less chrome and a whole lot more stainless steel. So by the time you got to the 115 series cars, it was almost everything was stainless steel. What's the relevance of that? Early cars, it's more expensive to get all that stuff addressed than it does the later cars. This is why. chroming has become a very expensive process anymore. And the earlier cars, the bumpers for example, were exceptionally heavy. Chrome is priced out based off of weight, okay? And a better chrome shop is going to do what's called a triple plating service. Okay, they're not going to just put a base coat of nickel down and then chrome over. They're going to repeat that process 3 times to ensure that they got the depth of chrome that they need to, protect the metal. And then also, when you think about what it takes to polish out stainless steel, that is a very labor-intensive job. Now, there's a couple things you need to think about if you're going to do this yourself. One, catalog everything you're taking over to your chromer. Take pictures of it. Okay, and make sure you understand what it is you're looking at, because when you get your product back, you need to account for every little thing. If you think about it, all the window frames and securing fixtures that are attached to those are all little pieces that will have to be separated and chromed individually. So it's not uncommon nowadays to see chroming go from anywhere from roughly $2,000 to $3,000 all the way up to $6,000–$7,000 anymore. It's an expensive process. The EPA is constantly after these guys, trying to make them go away. That's why you don't see so much chrome on cars anymore, is because from an environmental point of view, it's a very expensive process to pay for that service, because the chemicals that once they're used up, they have to be disposed of. Disposing of those harsh chemicals is an extremely expensive environmental fee to the people who do it. Now, with that said, we have some stuff back. This is basically the way you should get your stuff back. It shouldn't just be all thrown in a box. It should be individually wrapped items. Every little thing should be in non-contact with something else. That's a sign of a good chromer that's very concerned about how their product is presented. Everything we got back from this job is individually bagged or wrapped. Okay, so this right here is the threshold piece, so we're going to open it up for the first time. And when we sent these over, they had a lot of deep gouges in them, especially the driver's side, and obviously they were fairly flat and finished. There you go. A good chromer with really solid skills is going to do a couple of things. One, they'll be able to polish this out just like it should be. And doing just one threshold plate can sometimes take a couple of hours. But this one had a lot of deep scratches that need to be brought out. And it also had a lot of dents in it from, the shoes constantly hitting it that needed to be surfaced before it was polished out. We have a couple of different chromers we use, and quite honestly, the chromers we use is based off the budget allowed. This particular chromer is considered one of the very best in the country. I'll give you an example of their skill sets. All the chrome work that's on Air Force One was done by them. They do a lot of extensive high-end chroming for very expensive restorations. And this particular customer wants the very best, so in fact that's exactly what they got, was the very best. Now we're going to go look. Alright, so this is going to be the first time we're taking this off, and there's a couple things you're going to get a sense of what is a good chromer versus a standard chromer, if you will. One, when you take your product over to the person, they should also want to take their own pictures of your stuff so they know exactly what they received, and they should give you an itemized list as well. If you have an opportunity to walk around their facilities, do so. Get a sense of how clean the place is, because the cleaner the area is often dictates their standards, okay? And I'm going to show you some key notes to look for. Now we're about to open up the front bumper of a 65 GT, okay? Now the early cars had chrome bumpers, not stainless, and they're immensely heavy. Again, weight dictates the bit of the job. Now the more stainless it's on a car, it's less chroming obviously and more polishing. So obviously the earlier 105 cars would be substantially more expensive to do because of the amount of chrome and the lesser amount of stainless that was in those cars. Being an early car, lots of chrome. Okay. You know you have a really good chromer on hand when you look at the back side of your product. You won't necessarily expect this to be chromed out, but what you do expect is see a heavy nickeling process that's been done. I've had bumpers that we have sent out, and when they came back, it was bare steel back there and it was already rusting. Okay, that was somebody who was on the cheap and on the quick doing their job. This is somebody's got a lot of pride in their work, because the nickeling process, no expense was spared. They want their bonding process to be the best it can be. So that's when you look at the back side of your product, if you see heavy nickeling, not raw steel, you know that they're doing a great job. Here's the front of that bumper. Now this bumper was not straight, okay? A good chromer will be able to straighten out everything and make them look great. You can see the hammering marks on the inside of the bumpers. Some of these hammering marks will be from the factory, okay? Sometimes they're not. In this case, this was not a very straight bumper. It was close, but not great. So some of these hammering are from the chromer, and that's perfectly acceptable. That's normal. Okay, so just to get a sense of that, that is a really heavy, heavy bumper. The nickeling's all the way through on the back side, which shows that there's quality in place. And that's going to last forever, because that's a thick chroming process right there. Headliners. This is one of the more difficult cars to ever get a headliner installed in, primarily because you have the halo, which is not common in most cars, and you also have only one header bow. In this particular case, these cars, if you just bought one of these, for example, and the headliner's not in, make sure that you have the header bow and you have the halo. Okay, the halo is the piece that creates this issue. The header bow is up front and it's hidden behind one of the stitching, so you can't really see it. But the thing is that make sure those components are in. And also, if somebody's doing this on their own, trying to do this at home to save money, know this: use exceptionally short screws when holding the halo in place. And the header bow itself should have these little rubber end caps on each end to keep it centered in the car. Why is this important? If you don't have the end caps on the header bow, you could potentially push the header bow right through the metal, and it's real easy to dent the roofs on these. Okay, so it needs those end piece rubbers to keep it from damaging the roof itself. And I have literally seen screws that were fairly short but not short enough go right through the roof when screwing in the halo. You see all sorts of strange things in this business, and that has certainly happened. Sad thing of it is we saw that last time on a car that somebody else did, but it was just freshly painted. So now the roof had to be redone by the person who put the upholstery in. But anyway, so the car you saw prior to this was a sunroof car, which has no header bow and it has no halo. And those type of headliners have to be custom made, so they have to go to an upholstery shop to have that done. Upholstery guys are pretty difficult to find really good ones that you can have good communications with it, or stand up and they stand behind their product. If you find a person in your community that you really have that kind of relationship with, hang on to that, because we've been doing this a long time and there's only a handful of upholstery people that I feel comfortable with anymore, that I know are going to stand behind their work. This is pretty nice here, and we enjoyed this particular person's labors. He's very particular on how he gets it done, and he stands behind his product 100%, and we're happy with that. Okay, so the new noise you have to ignore today is the power washer in the background. What that's all about is the chassis for the 33 Packard that we're restoring is getting power washed. This is the last time we're going to do that before we disassemble it and send the frame out to get powder coated. But on to the next phase of our Giulia Super. There's a couple things about this that I wanted to bring up to speed. One, the engine bay is much cleaner now than it was, a couple days ago. The reason that is because this has been what we call chemically sanded and power washed a couple more times. Obviously, oil and grime and things of the nature that tend to be inside of an engine bay will affect how the paint bonds. More importantly, it'll get fish eyes, and the paint won't look that good in here. Granted, this is a budget job, but it doesn't mean that it should look like garbage. So again, what we did is we did a lot of chemical sanding to get the paint clean as possible, and we also at the same time we're being able to sand it so paint and primers will adhere to what we have in here right now. But because there is somewhat of a budget restraint to this car, we're not going to pull all the components out to paint it. Time is just not going to afford us that. But what we are going to do is something that if you're trying to do something at home, you can get away with doing. First of all, you notice the grill's still in. We got to get that out because that's just going to be in the way come paint time. But everything else is going to stay. So if you have to leave components in there, instead of using a bunch of paper and tape and not really having a very tight seal on things, there's a cheaper and easier way of doing things that you can get a better protection of the stuff you don't want to paint on. And that is good old-fashioned house aluminum foil. What we do is you get everything off the wall so you have access to it 360 degrees, or at least as much as possible. And you take your tin foil and you start wrapping those components. For example, the brake reservoir. Obviously highly contaminating stuff in here, and anything that it comes in contact with will ruin paint. So you take the aluminum foil, and you just wrap it around it. It doesn't have to look pretty, it just needs to cover. And one thing about it is you can compress aluminum foil really tight, and that will protect that piece quite easily. Brake booster, disconnected but not separated from the brake line. Another piece of tin foil. You get the point. You can just cover everything with the tin foil. Again, this isn't the ideal way of doing this, but when you have some limitations at hand, this is a good viable option. So if you're going to attempt to paint an engine bay in your own garage, this isn't a bad way to go, especially if you want to pull everything apart.